Tamara, welcome to the Western Standard Studio. We've really been looking forward to this. It's overdue to have you in here.
Thank
it really
you.
is. So
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here finally and
Really?
meet everyone in person.
I really appreciate it. I'm hoping we can have a good conversation, cover a lot of things. I want to clear some misconceptions or things that have been thrown your way. I'm going to start with one, though, because I noticed our news editor went and did it right off the bat. I asked you point blank in the news, because we've talked in the past and years gone by, through Maverick Party. I never refer to a person by their last name, so it never occurred to me. And pronouncing your last name shouldn't be that complicated, but it gets some people. It's Tamara Lich.
Yes.
So
yes,
see, we get that out of the way. So, further interviews and things like that.
Nobody gets it right.
There. See, we've already fixed up one big misconception in the first minute in the show.
Yes.
So, I guess I'm just going to start with, I want to talk a bit on the personal. How are you doing?
I'm doing really, really well. It's been quite busy. Obviously, there's still a lot going on with the lawsuits and the criminal charges and everything. So that's keeping me busy. And but I consider myself an eternal optimist. So I don't let it get me down.
Well, good. That's what I was happy to see when you came in the newsroom. You chat with everybody. You're really upbeat. You've had just a bizarre year that 14 months ago you never would have imagined was going to happen, and you're still in the midst of it. So, what kind of legal timeline are you looking at? I know they keep changing things, but is there kind of a light at the end of the tunnel where you might get closure on this?
Well, I'm really hoping so. So far, our criminal trial, because Chris and I are still at this point co-accused, and so we'll be tried together, is set for September 2nd, and I believe they've got 2 weeks set aside for that. So as far as the criminal stuff goes, I'm really hopeful that after that stuff will all be dealt with. And then, of course, we have the ongoing civil suit. So I never thought I'd have so many lawyers in my life.
Yeah, and I was just reading about that civil suit this morning, actually. They're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars, which is ridiculous. It's, I guess, a point of principle thing then, blood from a stone. As far as I know, you don't have hundreds of millions of dollars laying around.
No.
There's another one to clear up. I get so infuriated when I watch the social media things, and you haven't had much chance to speak. One was a rumor, and again, that, you've run off with a whole bunch of money out of this. I didn't see the Ferrari drop you off today or anything like that. So, people have been very helpful and things, but you haven't been standing by a bunch of
no. And and all the money that was donated, it was locked up immediately. Anyways, we have absolutely no access to it. So, I've heard I've bought property in Hull, Quebec. I heard I've taken off to Mexico. I hear all these rumors, and it's quite funny. And the ironic thing is that if people really want to know what's going on with the money, it's a Google search.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
We've had a forensic audit done, and then of course we had FinTrack investigate where the donations came from. So I chalk that up to laziness.
Yeah, well, and people just want to perceive certain things. Like I said, that's what part of what frustrated me. And as I said, I wanted to get you on talk and for people to realize they don't have to agree with what the Convoy was about, perhaps, or things like that, but you've just really been dragged through the mud as a terrorist. The terms I've heard, Nazi extremist, things like that. And at least to my knowledge, if you are all of those things, you keep them very, very well bottled up. Because I haven't seen any indications of it so far.
Yes, thank you. I don't think I'm a Nazi. No.
No, and just the absurdity of this whole mess. And also the fact that the government's been feeding it too. The vitriol in trying to keep you locked up. Speaking of points of principle, if you look at the basics of bail, it's if a person's presenting a risk to society, if you let them out, then perhaps you should keep them in. Now, our government hasn't been doing it very well in general. We had a police officer killed by a gentleman out on bail, and we're seeing all sorts of very dangerous people put out on bail all the time. But you really had to battle. You've never committed a crime. You've never harmed
no
anybody.
Criminal record, nothing. No.
And I imagine you haven't harmed anybody since you've been on bail.
No. Yeah, I've been behaving well.
Here anyways,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't really understand it. I think in a way I'm lucky that I'm not allowed on for social media right now because, people can be cruel, and I like to pride myself. I think I have pretty thick skin, though. I don't really let it get me down. My dad always said 10% of the people aren't going to like you anyways just because. So I'm not going to please everybody.
No, when that's, again, you still, sometimes you look at stuff and you read, but you can't help yourself. But over time you get, some people get used to it. Yeah, you're not.
But you need to understand though, that whole narrative was crafted by the PMO and the Public Safety Office about us before I even got into Big Red in Medicine Hat and left on the convoy. I mean, this narrative was totally crafted.
Well, part of my theory on it, for what it's worth, is that, I mean, there was no single leader of this whole movement. It was a really unprecedented organic thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that you scared them with was that you aren't a demon. You don't have swastika tattooed on your face. You don't have a big, long, crazy criminal history.
Right.
No. And that's not what they want to be projected to the public. They want it to be seen that everybody involved in this was insane and they're seditionists and they were trying to, rip the country to shreds. And that's my job.
Yeah.
And but I think that's part of why they really cracked down on you. I mean, if you were kind of off the handle, they would just will give a rope.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and we were talking earlier about the protests that happened in early 2020. So, I mean, I am Métis. So if I had been protesting in that protest and burning, railway ties, would the outcome have been different? Maybe I would be hailed as a hero by the Liberal government now.
Well, yeah, and some of the frustration. I mean, you brought that up when we were talking before too. So I mean, it was like COVID saved the government's butt from a sticky situation and actually it's related to what I was ranting about. The CGL pipeline sparked it off. Some protesters got removed from it, and then it sparked protests across the country. They blocked railways. It was First Nations, mostly, actually, I think, enviro activists hiding behind First Nations people. But
yes,
because of the COVID hit, it kind of gave them an out, and everything kind of came to an end. But otherwise, as you said, the government was in. They were negotiating all over the place. These guys are blocking rail lines. They're lighting fires. They're getting very dangerous, and they're negotiating. But with you guys in Ottawa, there was never a single even attempt to converse with you. And that's just so wrong.
Yeah. Especially during that protest in particular, the Prime Minister kept talking about the importance of dialogue and the importance of keeping dialogue open and hearing the other side of the story. And he never once wanted to hear our side of the story.
No. And as I said, you didn't even try. I said, I know politics. You can go through the motions. You can even send a representative from the Privy Office down to say, okay, we're going to talk to them, and then they can sit and go through the motion. Then they come back and say, these guys they're intractable. We couldn't get anywhere. But at least you showed you tried.
Yes.
But they didn't even offer that much.
No. Which still surprises me to this day, because I mean, one of the things I said about the donations, I mean, we raised over $10 million twice, but it was never about the money. It was the statement behind the money. And I think that really the support, the monetary support through donations, the donations that we received food and clothing from Canadians, and just the people that showed up on the overpasses and the side of the highways, I think that really scared them.
Well, it should. I mean, that raised more money in a few weeks than the entire governing party does in 6 months. So, I mean, it shows an outside a lot more support. It's hard to pretend that this is only 5,000, whatever amount of people in Ottawa, when clearly you've got donor numbers in the tens of thousands of people supporting it from outside of there, possibly hundreds of thousands. Yeah. Likewise, you didn't get any calls from Putin in large donations or anything like that. That was the one. Even the CBC had to admit that one was BS.
Yeah, that was hilarious, actually.
I mean, maybe we talked a bit about just when you started, if you kind of run, because I mean, again, you weren't a professional activist. This isn't your thing. You were politically active before. That's how I first ran across you. You were on the board with the Maverick Party.
Yes, yeah.
So you're active, and you started the fundraiser for people going out when the convoy was going. But I mean, at that point, you didn't imagine anything what was going to turn out like
no, and I laugh about this because we did not see that coming. Really, literally, like when I first talked to Chris Barber, I just offered. I said, "This is my skill set. I'm good at logistics and administration and organization. How can I help you?" And I just had. When I started the fundraiser, I just assumed, we'd make maybe $20,000 in donations, which would pay, say, for Chris and Bridget and some truckers to drive across the country and stand up with their signs on Parliament Hill and then hop in their trucks and come back home. And, we blew past that in 24 hours. I think we were over $100,000 in donations within the first 24 hours.
Well, I think part of it was just you were the first one out with it.
Yeah.
And you tapped into something that was much bigger. People didn't even know was there until they had the ability to contribute.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was a perfect storm of events, I think.
Well, and a lot more people, again, I think that's part of why I got it, because people could see there's a lot more behind this than the others. Like most people just they don't have the ability. You got the kids at home, you got the job or whatever.
Mhm.
I can't pick up and drive across the country and take part in that protest. But boy, I really like what they're doing. So
Yeah.
here's $10, here's $50, here's $100 or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and again, people, I think just so many people were able to come, and every Canadian just wanted to feel like they were a part of it. So if they couldn't come or they couldn't go to the road, I mean, they wanted to be a part of it. So even donating $10 made them feel,
Yeah.
that they were part of the gang, kind of.
Well,
Yeah.
that's it. So I know it's hard. It's working with hindsight. Like, are you there things you? I know this could be dangerous. Are there things you wish you'd done differently yourself?
Not really. I mean, I look back at that. Obviously, I spent a lot of time thinking about everything and what I could do differently. And, I'm a believer that everything happens for a reason. And so I don't know what we could change. I mean, other than say the exit strategy to get out a little bit sooner. But, that was one of the things with the deal with the city that we were so excited about, at least from my perspective. Like, I thought that was going to give us an out, or going to allow us to start, so we start with the city, and then maybe we can talk to the province next, and then maybe the feds will come in. Like, I really saw that as a first step in an exit strategy.
Yeah, because there does have to be an end game. We were kind of talking a bit about that
Yes.
outside. You
Yeah.
can't camp indefinitely for months. I think some people might have been prepared to, but realistically, things had to come. But there was just never a chance for that plan to form or go into action because everything, well, finally the Emergencies Act said, okay, everything's going to
Mhm.
blow up now.
Well, and I don't think any of us really thought that the federal government would not come out and talk to us. Like, I thought for sure within a week, somebody would be sent to just hear us out or ask what we wanted or ask what the problem is. And, that just never happened.
In any conflict, I mean, negotiation's the first step. If
Yeah.
it's, and I'm not comparing this to a bank robbery, but let's say there was a bank heist and there's a bunch of hostages. You don't come in guns blazing. You start by negotiating.
That's right. Yeah.
And they didn't even start there. They
No.
went straight to the enforcement aspect of it. So, I mean, you had a lot of time to think, a lot of time while you were in remand. Just to review, how long were you in custody?
48 days in jail, all told, between the summer and last winter. Yeah.
I mean, aside from one weird night in the 90s, in a drunk tank, I haven't had experience in the jails. But from what I've heard, remand is kind of one of the worst spots to be in too, because it's just it's a temporary, theoretically custodial spot, whereas a long-term facility, at least you'll have some
That's
services.
right. Yeah,
So
that's right. Yeah.
that's why they offer prisoners, I think, 2-to-1 on sentences for remand time spent. It must have been at least brought you down while you're in there. I mean, tough on you. Eh?
Nope. When I was arrested, I just felt like, through the course of this whole thing, I feel like so many things got exposed. I mean, the mainstream media definitely exposed themselves. Justin Trudeau comes right out of the gate calling us a bunch of names, and organizations like GoFundMe expose themselves, and so when I was arrested, I was literally just at peace with it. I just thought, okay, my higher power, what I choose to believe in, obviously had more work for me to do. And I didn't feel afraid. I just, you just put one foot in front of the other, and
Well, and one thing to thank you guys for what you brought up, in a sense, like was that they really did expose just how broken the establishment media is, and just from a selfish perspective in the Western Standard, our subscriptions shot through the roof over that period. Same with Rebel and Post Millennial and True North, because people were so repulsed by the terrible slanted coverage we saw from CBC, CTV Global. They were all awful.
Yeah, it was terrible.
And people saw through it, though.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
did.
that's good. It's about time. And I'm really happy that organizations like this one and, all the independents are finally getting some traction.
Yeah, well, and people are retreating to us, I guess, in a sense. So,
yeah.
So what are your plans going forward? I mean, you can only do so much while you're still kind of in a legal limbo, but still, I mean, you got plans. You're not going to be in jail for 30 years, despite what some people are claiming to wish upon you and such.
Yeah. Hopefully not 30 years. No. I'll be long dead by then, I'm thinking. So, yeah, again, everything is still a bit in limbo with these charges and everything hanging over me. But I do have a book coming out that should be out hopefully within the next few weeks. So I've been working on that. And then we'll see. There's just so much going on right now. It's hard to know where I'm going to land, but I've had a lot of people ask me about entering politics, which is something that I'm not really keen on doing now, if ever. But so I guess we'll see. We'll see how it all falls apart or falls out. I mean, yeah.
So, what? Uh, which was the biggest? I'm just trying to clear misconceptions. What's the biggest one you'd like to cover today while you're on here? Like, there's the list is so long on things that have gone around out there, or false news, or things like that. Like, what would you like to clarify while you've got a moment?
That's a good question because there is so much. I think, from my perspective, especially sitting through that whole inquiry, that was 6 weeks of, and I was there just about every day listening to the testimony and all the witnesses and everything. And my takeaway from the POEC was, regardless of what you think, we're just a bunch of grassroots blue collar workers, and we were professional. We were organized. I think that we were able to identify problems before they occurred, and I feel like we did everything right, just about, for the most part. We were worried about safety and keeping people safe. We were advocating for peace and love and respect and respecting the police officers. Which is just stuff that you don't hear very much anymore. So when I look back on it, I think we just did so many things right, and I'm just so proud of the truckers and the supporters, and we didn't even break a window there.
No, that was striking. I mean, for a protest with that many people, and no matter where on the spectrum you are, sometimes you're going to attract some people who get a little too excited, or some people who are just outright crazy, and they're going to do some damage or hurt people. And as much as the warnings constantly came out, it wasn't happening. No. This was annoying for people. I understand. If I lived down there and the horns were going for days, I'd really be getting grumpy as well, or trying to get to work in the traffic. But that's what happens with protests. You live in Ottawa.
Well, it is the capital city.
Yeah. But, there was no riots. There was no, again, despite the efforts of some media sources to try and claim, there were no buildings being
the arson,
down, no shotguns seized.
Yeah.
I guess also to clarify too, though, part of the problem with a non-centrally sort of led thing, though, there were a few of you who were certainly the representatives and organizers, but at the same time, it was diverse. The border issues. There was Windsor and Coutts in Alberta, but those had no. You have to say they were related. It all blew up at the same time. It's the same grievances and concerns, but these were separate protests.
They were all separate, their own grassroots movement. And when we were, I think Emerson was the first one that we heard of, and we were on our way to Ottawa still. So, and we were so busy when we got on the ground. Like, we knew that they were happening at these different locations, border crossings, but I couldn't follow it. I was too busy, I knew that they were happening. I tried to just get kind of the Coles Notes versions throughout the day to find out, how things were progressing down there. But yeah, we had enough of our own things to worry about in Ottawa, let alone those, right? But
yeah, well, it's just that there's separate issues still being dealt with in the law. There's the Coutts bunch, there were, and you can't speak to it because you had absolutely nothing to do with it.
That's right, yeah.
But that gets thrown onto the Ottawa protests at the same time. People saying this was an act of sedition and there were firearms and this, there was none of that.
Well, nobody's been charged with sedition.
No, and that's another one.
Which is funny.
Yeah, if it was treason, if it's sedition, we have it on the books.
Yeah.
And they certainly weren't afraid to charge you with everything they possibly could. So you think they probably would have thrown that into the bunch.
If they thought that that's what we were going to do, which was never, that was never the case, Can
you address a little bit of that? Most of that came from that ridiculous memorandum of understanding that was kind of posted on Facebook, but that was just kind of something hatched up by a little group on
a different organization, right? A totally different organization. I've never even read it. I don't even know what it says. That was never our intention. We just wanted to be heard and wanted the federal government to take a look at how these mandates and stuff were affecting people. And again, like every single day driving across this country, people were crying on my shoulder because they were about to kill themselves, or they just lost their business, or they just lost their job, or that was the core group, I guess. That was our main concern was, there has to be a better way.
Well, and again, that's something I appreciate, at least, and I'm sure a lot of Canadians do, that you show that there's a line. That there's a point where Canadians have had enough. And even if it's a minority of Canadians, if you're talking about 10% or 20%, that's a significant minority of Canadians who are saying, we've had enough. We're not putting up with this any longer.
That's right.
We just kind of hope that lesson got driven home to, I don't know, that's not a government that's easy at taking lessons. But,
No.
there is a line eventually.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
I mean, had there been, say, after the protests, he's just guessing, and I mean, you wouldn't have taken part of it, but if they increased more restrictions and brought more stuff down, I got a feeling a very tired population would have pushed back again. They said, that's enough. This is where it's
well, the Ontario government during the POEC, we're talking about bringing masks back in and recommending them, and they all but stopped short of mandating them. We were obviously kind of watching that very closely because I was curious too how far they were willing to go again. But they just stopped short of mandating it.
Yeah, and I mean, there was a lot that just seemed eager to bring in as many mandates and controls as they can, and there were people fighting against the removal of the ridiculous vaccine passports in Calgary.
The govern me harder daddies.
Yes.
I call them the govern me harder daddies.
And I still get on her case with Deborah Yedlin, heads of the Chamber of Commerce. These are business leaders, supposedly, said, it'll be bad for restaurants if you get rid of that vaccine passport. This is telling me a business leader, you've never run a business. I ran a restaurant for 5 years.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you're going to have one more step that annoys and limits your customers and everything, it's not good for business. I mean, you can try to make the case it's for health, but don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining and say that it's doing me good as a business, because it's not.
That's right.
But that needed to be exposed, because she shows that there was that element of people, they want more. They want to keep the restrictions. I don't know what it is, that security blanket, that govern me harder.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see that. I don't talk to anybody that actually wants more restrictions and more rules and more laws. I don't run in those circles.
No,
anyway.
But yeah, that's outside of our bubbles, and that's things we got to be careful with.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good that you got to break from social media. We're bad for that.
Yes.
We talk about algorithms too. We hear a lot of our own echo chambers, but hey, there's other voices out there.
Yeah.
Maybe just to kind of fish up, maybe you're not planning on organizing protests again. We're standing
no, God, no.
But worrisome on where we've had this precedent set on crushing protests. And we're seeing that big debate in Calgary right now with, again, where the person agrees or disagrees with the readings of the libraries and things like that, where the city has banned protesting within 100 yards of the facility. We got to be really careful when you start limiting the ability to protest, even if you don't like.
That's right.
We were kind of talking about that before. Yeah. When you crack down on them, the next government might be after you with that same legislation.
That's exactly right. And that's kind of what I say when people talk about how, like, lock her up and throw away the key and I hope she goes to jail for life. Well, that's fine if that's what you want. I mean, but you have to realize that this government isn't going to be in power forever. And maybe the next one is going to find fault with something that you've done.
It might be the head of Greenpeace next time. It might be
right.
An Indigenous leader, because if it's a government that doesn't particularly feel as fond of their protests.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to protect these.
I find it ironic and a little bit funny that you can ban protests, because that's actually what a protest is. I mean, wasn't it Trudeau that said at the POEC in his testimony that he doesn't think it's right that people protest in order to change policy? Like, that's the whole point of having a protest.
Well, yeah. I know, and it is a fuzzy area when you get between civil disobedience and the right of protest.
It's a fine line.
And, the lines get crossed. Yeah. Sometimes the state has to intervene. And I know my libertarian followers cringe when I say that. But sometimes there's a line crossed. But
I think it all has to be respectful. And that's kind of my biggest thing is to always be respectful. Like, we didn't want to go to Ottawa and call people a bunch of names and be rude and terrible, then when the mask mandates were in, I put a mask on to walk into a store. I'd put it on at the last minute and take it off as soon as I could. But I mean, I could still respect their rules. And I didn't go in there and call them names or tell them how stupid I thought it was. Like, I think you're going to lose people when you start being disrespectful and rude.
Yeah, there was a circumstance of that in Calgary. There was a bunch of protesters went into a mall and really made a racket and yelling. I mean, these are innocent mall security people and retail clerks. Look, they probably don't like the masks any more than you do.
Yeah.
You're not doing your cause any favors when you get on their case. Maybe kind of asking about that as trying to lead or be one of the leaders of this group in a sense. How many fires did you have to put out? Because as we said, there are some kind of offbeat people. I mean, one of the best things I saw was that one clown walking around with that Confederate flag.
Yes,
and he was masked. And I still wonder how much he really endured. He happened to be masked as well, but they didn't put up with that. And that was the best thing I could see. The other protesters chased him off, not the police, not anything else. They said, hey, you aren't with us. Get stuff. Go away.
And they didn't do it rudely or call him any names. They just said, you're not welcome here, so please leave.
Did you guys make some of those efforts occasionally? Or do you
have there was a lot. I mean, we were putting out lots of fires, honestly. But, for the most part, people were really good. Of course, any type of protest or large gathering like that is going to attract a few bad eggs. And again, we just kept our message about peace and love and unity. And, if something came up, we fixed it, There was the Shepherds of Good Hope. That was I think the first incident that I heard of. And I still don't even know the story there, what happened. But, we heard that some truckers went in and stole a bunch of food and they were rude, which I can't see, period, happening. But, what did we do? Well, we took a bunch of donations and we had food banks and shelters turning food away because we were giving so much away. But that was because of the generosity of Canadians, it was incredible.
Well, I mean, it was quite something. We're starting to run the timeout. But I mean, it's good just to be able to look back and review, because I think with most of the tempers, when they calm down, I think a lot of people will look back on this and realize that there was a lot of mistakes made on a lot of parts. And but I mean, I think it'll look kindly mostly on a lot of the organizers' parts as compared to what you've taken. But I'm biased on that. I don't know. Some people are always going to despise every part.
Oh, of course.
Right to the end. I mean, something I'm hopeful for. A lot of judges, they liberal appointed or not, they take their role very seriously and they follow the law seriously. And I'm hoping it's a rational one when the time comes when they realize, we're not serving the world any better by putting you back behind bars or any kind of crazy, odious sins.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I'm not sure what the outcome will be, but after 48 days in jail over mischief, I just can't see them putting me back in. But who knows? Nothing would surprise me anymore.
I allowed myself to be surprised when that happened, when they sent homicide detectives all the way from Ottawa. 2 of them flew them to Medicine Hat to pick you up and fly you back. Yeah. Again, surprised and outraged me. Not just because of cracking down on you, but okay, look at the resources. These are homicide detectives. There's some dead people you should be finding the killers of. I mean, you got better things to do.
And right at that time, there had been a mass stabbing in Ottawa. I think a city councillor and her daughter were stabbed. So I thought that was a bit of an overreach too. I mean, 2 homicide. I'm literally 5 feet tall.
Yeah, I noticed you're a small person when you came in. I mean, you only need so much restraint, a little masking tape on the airplane seat, and you're not going anywhere. But
and the irony is, literally all they would have had to do was call me and say, Miss Leach, we're concerned you've breached your conditions. Please go to the police station. They had me surveilled and followed, and then taken down the street on my way home from work. Actually, I was on my way home from my sureties. I just stopped at my sureties so that she could go through all my devices and make sure I wasn't on social media or communicating with people I'm not supposed to be communicating with. So, you know what I mean? It was a bit of a surprise.
Absurd.
I'm really not that big of a deal.
Well, they feel you are. And as I said, you are to them. You're a symbol of, darn, there were rational people behind it, and I don't think they want the public to see that.
No.
And you're still letting the public know that, so I really do appreciate that, and I really appreciate you coming in today. I'm looking forward to the book. I hope we can talk again when that's out.
Absolutely, we will.
Great. Anything else you'd like to say to the audience before we let you go?
Thanks for all the support that everyone's given, and I look forward to seeing what the next few months brings.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. You become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny. You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year for unlimited access.